Cardinal Matt Staader. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. You wanted to talk today about some interesting, futuristic, but maybe ancient technologies.
Yeah.
One of them I know you were telling me about earlier. We're talking about the Shroud of Turin. We're talking about teleportation technology. We're talking about faster than light travel.
Yeah.
And a lot of this has to do with light, from what you were telling me.
In a broader sense, the electromagnetic spectrum, but visible light, which makes up everything that our eyes see, was what we understand as light.
Well, what does this have to do with like starships?
Okay. It's in principle, it's fairly basic. The and I would argue that Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, was given a bit of divine inspiration when it came to how some of the or many of the technologies in the original series of Star Trek, at least, was depicted. Because the way the design works, you've got the two on the rear section of the ship. You've got the two objects called nacelles that are parallel to each other, each producing matter and antimatter, and they're channeled together into a reaction chamber where they produce a series of explosions, carefully timed, which in the reaction chamber they produce a vibration which radiates out, producing what Star Trek refers to as the warp field. But what this actually does, it allows the ship, or anything inside the field, really, by changing the frequency and the timing, it's the same thing, really, of those detonations in the warp core, to shift into a different part of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Mm.
So, where human science is aware of visible light, of course, on one end of that, it shifts into infrared, microwaves, radio waves, all that kind of thing. That is on that end of it. That is about as far as human science can detect.
But it goes further than that.
And on the other end, you've got ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, and the whole scope of that, as we've got on the screen there, is essentially the extent of what humanity can, or human science can detect, yes. But it does go much, much further. It's often argued that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. And this, of course, comes from Einstein's theory of relativity.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a problem, a big problem with that calculation. One of the things that he incorporates into it is time. And just by me saying that, can you see the problem?
Not at face value. Tell me.
Time is nothing but a man-made unit of measurement.
Okay. Fair enough.
Time really only, aside from this given moment, or any given moment that any person out there is living in, time as a physical thing does not exist.
Well, yeah, we're only aware of what we recall from a moment of present, and so we're consistently always in a moment of present. So there technically is no future, nor is there a past.
And the only one who has any knowledge or control over the future is God. And that is primarily through his own hand,
Mm-hmm.
controlling the direction that events go in. But, okay, getting back to this, if we could bring up the electromagnetic spectrum image again for a second.
Yeah, the alternate image that you had.
So, now I'm not saying that the Anunnaki ships, or in this case the Starfleet ships, are using infrared, but I'll use that as the example for this. let's just say hypothetically, infrared light moves at twice the speed of visible light. You activate that warp field, and you have it vibrating at the frequency of infrared. This now means that that ship can be accelerated up to twice the speed of visible light.
This is hypothetically speaking, right?
Hypothetically, because I could not tell you off the top of my head what the difference is between the speed of visible light and the speed of infrared.
Mm-hmm.
I could not tell you.
But what we are saying is that
different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum have different maximum speeds.
Interesting.
And if you want to move at a set or accelerate up to a certain speed, you match the frequency of that warp field to that part of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Mm.
And then whatever ship is inside that field and producing it can be accelerated using thrust up to that potential maximum speed. And so we're told that current rocket technology would take someone, or a man-made vessel, 8 to 9 months to get from Earth to Mars. That's what NASA tells us. Hypothetically, a ship equipped with this same kind of technology could make that journey in a matter of moments.
Depending on the light phase.
Depending on the frequency that they use, and yeah. Well, that's the primary thing.
It's wild. But yeah, that's very similar to Star Trek.
It is.
There were some other technologies that you had brought up.
Well, this is the other most common, or the most commonly associated technology of Star Trek is the old classic, the tractor beam, which can, using a beam of what they call gravitons in the series, can pull any object into or towards the ship that the beam is coming from.
But there is a technology like this that the Anunnaki use, but it's not with gravitons, right?
It uses a combination of basically a focused magnetic field which locks onto the target and basically changes the polarity of the molecules. So the ship, or the emitter of that beam on the ship, and the target become like two oppositely charged magnets. They're just drawn together.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing, because there may be obstacles in the way, and there is two different versions of it that have been used throughout the Anunnaki's relatively recent history. One where the object would simultaneously be vibrated in a phase that would allow to just pass through any any obstacle that was in the way, and a more recent version which would move the obstacles themselves out of phase so that the body would just, whatever that target is, would just pass through them unobstructed.
There was actually a movie that a clip of a movie that you sent my way, and This Is the End, right?
Yeah, and I have seen the movie, but this particular scene is my favourite part of it.
It actually shows what you're talking about.
Exactly.
It shows the people vibrating, but it also shows the objects that they're passing through. You could see a light being emitted from them and through them.
And as the beam is shut off, there is actually a hole left in the ceiling that's burning around the edges. See in the background that it was only a fraction of a second there, but as the beam's shut off, you can see like an orange glow right at the edge of the ceiling there.
That's very cool. Yeah, you noticed that there was nobody getting phased out of the marijuana dispensary across the street. Nobody was taken from there. They all got left behind.
Well, I didn't notice that myself, to be honest, but
Oh, you
in
tell the green cross? That's what that means.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, in Australia we don't have them, so it didn't immediately jump out at me.
I just didn't notice that right away.
Okay.
I'm from Washington State. They had a lot of those over there,
Okay.
and this is actually set in California. So, no, there's a more ancient example we were talking about before, and this is what we were really indicating in the title and description of the video: the
The
Shroud
Shroud
of
of
Turin.
Turin,
Yeah,
probably the most famous piece of fabric in human history. Now, there's most commonly in mainstream media, they've tried to debunk this by claiming that it was a forgery produced essentially during the Crusades, that it's no more than 800 years old.
this is a photo negative of the Shroud of Turin.
It is, yeah.
The actual fabrics, the linen fabrics, and all that were of a different color, and obviously, this is being a polar negative. They were actually dark burn marks
Yeah.
on this.
And samples have been tested extensively under different conditions on the same kind of material to try and replicate the image. And it has been achieved. And in ways that actually verify that an advanced technology was used on the body of Yeshua after he was wrapped in the shroud. It's I first read about it several years ago that they exposed one of these samples to ultraviolet radiation, but they did it in a vacuum. So while the fabric was exposed to the light, it wasn't exposed to the heat that's produced by that beam. And the exact same type of markings that produced this image appeared on that fabric.
Mm. So that's basically the only logical explanation
That I can see, yeah. The argument that claims that it's a 800-year-old forgery primarily relies upon carbon dating. And although, again, in mainstream science, carbon dating is portrayed as this bulletproof method for determining the date of an object, there has been a lot of flaws proven with that. Now, this is the screenshot here is directly refers.
No, if you want to recite from it, go ahead. I won't bother putting it on the screen.
Well, again, I'm not going to recite from it directly because people can read, but
no, I mean I just have you and I on the screen right now. If you want to recite from it, go ahead.
All right. Well, it was deduced that vacuum UV radiation is the only possible explanation for the image's formation. First, in order to turn linen into perfectly photographically sensitive material, you need light radiation, and that's a fundamental of photography. However, it must be without any accompanying heat radiation. The formation of the shroud's image would take several billion watts of light radiation, which exceeds the maximum output of any source of UV radiation known today. Now, if the accompanying heat energy had been present, the cloth would have vaporized in less than 1/40th of a billionth of a second. And the theory was validated in another scientific study, which stated vacuum ultraviolet photons account for very thin coloration depth, the hue of color, and the presence of image in linen parts not in contact with the body. Now, obviously, it does not mean the image was produced by a laser. Rather, the laser is a powerful tool to test and obtain the light parameters suitable for a shroud-like coloration.
So they used modern technology to determine that whatever was used is much more advanced than what we have
Exactly.
today.
Yes.
Interesting. And this goes on.
It does. One of the interesting things, and anyone that can look at the image and see that the bones in the hands are visible, like an X-ray. Now, and it comes up looking exactly like what the bones on a hand look like on an X-ray. Medical X-ray produced today in any hospital today, with the flesh still around it. It does imply that the body covered with the shroud became transparent, visibly transparent, which means the body was moved out of phase in the exact same terms that the Lord himself has used to describe not only the nature of the soul, but to describe how the faster than light travel works, and how transporter technology works. So the only conclusion that can be deduced from this is that Yeshua's body after the crucifixion was beamed out of that tomb.
And through the shroud itself. The shroud basically like collapsed through the body as it was passing through it. Wow.
And then through the ceiling of the tomb, on board a ship, so that the body could be healed, restored to a point where the spirit and the soul could inhabit the body again, so that he could return.
Wow.
And then this little bit of information goes on to further reinforce it, that the image was created by a burst of electromagnetic radiation. Now, this is coming from the body. I don't know enough about the particulars of how the transporter technology works to say whether or not the body would emit its own energy in response to it being subjected to the beam, but I can't see it being impossible.
And for it to be that safe too, without actually vaporizing the shroud, with billions of watts of energy.
It's to be able to. Well, the university had to do it in a vacuum to prevent the heat of that beam from also being exposed to the shroud, also being exposed to that. But the amount of energy that it took would have, if the heat was there, it would have vaporized it in a fraction of a second.
Wow. So, we've spoken about the Shroud of Turin, about the Transphasic light technology, electromagnetic fields, at varying degrees of wattage and magnification.
Enormous wattages too.
Yeah. We even talked about how that same or similar technology is used to assist in faster than light travel. And there's other technologies that we're actually seeing that humanity is coming closer to that was also displayed on Star Trek.
Yeah. Personally, I'd lean towards the theory of at least a degree of divine inspiration. If not with all these other people, but with Gene Roddenberry himself, as I mentioned earlier, that the ideas of how he portrayed these things were given to him. But
basically with like technology that already exists somewhere in the universe.
Exactly.
And basically also what humanity is destined to become a part of.
Yes. There's a form of preparation through media, preparing mankind for technologies that they would be seeing well in advance.
And we're seeing steps towards that, basically.
And massive steps, especially in recent years. Now, there's many devices, well, many is a matter of opinion, really, but a number of devices in the Star Trek lore primarily in the original series and the Next Generation. Later versions are a bit more theatrical, but those two in particular show a number of devices that have inspired real-world developments in the same direction.
Like what we're showing on the screen here is the medical tricorder.
The medical tricorder, yeah. And this device has a display screen and a handheld device that can essentially diagnose almost any medical condition just by holding it near the body of the patient. And in there's a couple of different companies, but this is the one that this is the device that most accurately matched. There was another one I saw that I couldn't find enough information on it to include, that can, just by taking a sample of blood, it can be compared against any selected virus to diagnose whether a person is infected with it in a matter of minutes.
But what we have here is like probably the closest approximation to
the medical tricorder.
Yeah.
This is in itself capable of examining or carrying out, I think, 11 different examinations. That it's equipped with a sensor to do ECGs and EKGs, a stethoscope, thermometer, a pulse oximeter, which measures the oxygen in the blood, and a Ultra HD camera that has attachments to examine the ears and the nose, the throat, and the skin. In addition, it can be fed third-party sensor data from blood pressure devices, weight measuring, glucometers, ultrasound, spirometers, which I don't know what that is actually, and other medical devices as well. But I don't know enough medically to know, with those 11 different things, in addition to the additional data that it can take. In addition to that, this device is also simple enough that any person can connect it to their computer with a USB cable, be in a video call with a doctor, and that doctor at the other end of the computer, at the other end of the call, can see the readings that the device is taking.
I would love to have something like this, and only thing I would hope that it does is have some kind of Bluetooth connection to connect to my phone. Perhaps might even be better, rather than having to do it via USB. But
that would probably be more convenient for most people.
Yeah, or even connect to the Wi-Fi. I could tell by some of this it does require some physical contact, like for the pulse oximeter, you got to put your finger on that.
Yeah.
And the thermometer, stethoscope, EKG, ECG, those probably require physical contact to the chest or back.
The thermometer looks like it could be replaced. Well, I do know that there are non-contact thermometer technologies out there. So that is another one that could be replaced with a non-contact method. But things like stethoscopes and EKGs, I'm not sure if that could actually be adapted to be a non-contact type thing like what we actually see in Star Trek. But
I'm pretty sure it would probably end up becoming some modification to the camera.
Okay.
That I would assume that eventually...
A multi-spectrum camera.
Yeah. Viewing things beyond certain spectrums, you might be able to see more going on.
That would essentially make the camera a transphasic device in itself.
Yeah, which, I mean, as they showed on that image earlier with the medical tricorder, let's bring it up again. Right here. They're just pointing the device at the person, and they're supposed to be getting readings at them. But if you watch episodes of Star Trek, like Next Generation, and they show Dr. Crusher, she's holding that piece, that attachment to the tricorder, and essentially she's just like moving it up and down,
like a scanner,
and looking at them and looking at the placement of where she's scanning, and then looking at the tricorder device. Essentially, that's what it looks like it's doing.
Hmm.
Is a visual scan.
Interesting. I, I have seen. I haven't seen what you're talking about, but um,
Yeah, they don't go into
the
great detail about how it works on the
yeah,
show, but they do show, like you say, they show a lot of examples of different medical technologies. Um, this is an example of an injection device,
yeah, which doesn't actually penetrate the skin like a needle like, and a syringe type device does.
but yeah, clearly it required some contact with the skin, right? Not just through the clothing.
Yeah,
And there's a device that's very similar to that that's already been developed by MIT.
yeah, and this apparently just a like controlled at a micro level, just propels the liquid of the medication or whatever it is at a high enough velocity to penetrate the skin cells and pass through them into the body.
Yeah, they would certainly need to not do too much velocity, otherwise it could even pass through the bone.
Well, the thing that I thought of, and I don't really know how much of an issue this would be, that liquid is propelled at the speed of sound. If you were to put too much energy into it, you could potentially push a whole heap of air into the body as well.
Yeah, it would need to be just the volume of liquid
Yeah.
that's propelled, which, yeah, there's some dangers there. But as there is with any sufficiently advanced technology, can be the greater the danger. Um, a lot of people, they're leery, they're afraid of this new technology around food, and the food replicator is. I mean, that's a really big deal on Star Trek. A lot of people might look forward to replicator technology, but we're not quite there yet.
the the concept was first introduced in later seasons of the original series, but it was refined into this idea of a food preparation. Well, at least in the next generation, it was presented almost exclusively as a food preparation device
Well, they also use this replicator technology to create physical objects,
of any description, essentially.
so long
And
as the base materials, were available in the supply
yeah,
system.
and I remember reading once that the writers of Star Trek absolutely hate the existence of this.
Well,
Because
I can understand why.
any problem that happens on the ship, any device that fails, you print new parts in the replicator, problem solved.
Well, they actually made an entire episode about using replicator technology with a sufficiently advanced enough artificial intelligence repair robot.
Interesting.
And it basically it used replicator technology to create its own customized tools to fulfill any necessary task.
Wow. I don't think I saw that one.
Yeah, and it would basically, like, the crawl tubes that they would go through to get to different engineering parts of
Mm-hmm.
the ship. Well, it would traverse those with much greater efficiency,
Okay.
and it would modify its own tools to complete the job. And it even created new tools that never existed before to for greater efficiency.
I'm gonna have to see if I could find that episode. That sounds interesting.
It is. But I could understand why the writers would be upset about that, because a great deal of, you know, of the story would be in, oh, well, we're lacking these supplies. We need to go find a way to get them.
The replicator essentially becomes its own Mary Sue.
I don't know what that is.
It's well, the recent critics of the Disney Star Wars movies in particular have described the character of Rey as being a Mary Sue, which is essentially a female protagonist in a TV show or movie or a book, I guess, who can just automatically do everything perfectly.
Oh, Mary Poppins.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was thinking, well, you say Mary Sue. I was like, I don't know who Sue is, but I know Mary Poppins, and
But
she could do anything. She had like her own Hermione bag.
we go from seeing In the original Star Trek movies, we go from seeing Luke when he's first handed the lightsaber. Yeah, you know the meme. Handed the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy, immediately point at face. Then it gets to the point where he can't really use it proficiently until like the events of Return of the Jedi. Rey picks up the same thing and is effectively fighting Kylo Ren with no problems whatsoever.
Mary Sue.
in
I
the-
get
yeah.
it. Yeah, I get it now.
Picks up how to use the Force almost
Okay.
by accident.
Well, food.
But anyway, we're
food
getting off
production
course.
technology today is not the Mary Sue of food. In fact, it looks quite disgusting. This is supposed to be a cake
Yeah,
made by a 3D printer.
they used a series of basically syringes full of different gelatinous compounds, including graham cracker paste, raspberry jam, I think.
Right. So if you cook this, it'd be a different consistency, right?
Once it was finished printing, they actually cooked it with a laser.
Fucking dorks. I'm sorry. These people are nerds. Why they gotta keep being nerds?
We're definitely a long way from.
Yeah.
See, there it is.
Yeah.
Graham cracker paste, peanut butter,
banana paste,
jelly, Nutella, banana paste,
frosting,
and
cherry.
yeah.
Okay, this kind of makes sense, you know, assistance in making a peanut butter sandwich, but they'll even print the bread.
The principle is there,
Yeah.
but the replicator works on the molecular level. It has stores of a variety of different molecular, like just substances.
Yeah. I would eat some 3D printed food, but when you start getting into like proteins, things like steak and stuff, it looks
Now,
ridiculous.
this
It looks like a dessert, but it
This-
definitely isn't.
okay. One thing I want to point out is although we see there the different nozzles there marked with fat, blood, and muscle, what that is printing is entirely plant based. It's just labelled with things, different compounds that are designed to mimic different parts of the structure of the meat.
Right. So it's actually like tree blood. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I've seen trees bleed, so it's like maybe it does taste like blood.
From the first time I saw that 3D printed plant based steak, this is the first thing I thought of.
What, Legos?
Basically, yes.
Because that's what this is. I mean,
It is.
it's a
Well,
Lego piece.
yes, it is. That's the first thing I thought of when I thought of the coloured gradients. And,
You know, that's probably something that these nerds should take into account. No offense to the nerds out there. Maybe you
I'm a
should.
far bigger fan of what Eric was talking about a couple of weeks ago with the lab grown meat.
Well, I'm just saying, to make it presentable, why not squirt all that crap into a mold that's actually shaped like a steak instead of like a 3D printed carpet mat? You know what I mean? Like, they could do way better with the
A
presentation.
3D printed Persian rug.
Well, that's what it looks like. Like, oh, you've got your white and your red and your slightly more red, and
Yeah.
it looks like layer upon layer of goop.
Yeah.
I'm sure it cooks and looks fine.
Once it is cooked, and according to people that have eaten it, although one of the primary things that's used is beetroot, or beets, as
Uh-huh.
our American viewers would be more
Yeah, that would provide the coloration.
coloration, and pea protein, but anyway, moving on, because clearly we have a long way to go before 3D printers are at the level of the Star Trek replicators.
No, I don't even think the technology would even... I think they're completely separate from one
I
another.
think they're similar in concept,
Yeah.
but the application, yes, it has
Yeah.
to change.
It's like the wheel compared to the automobile. You know, like, yeah, okay, we're getting started with that.
It's a it's a stepping stone.
Yeah, and... Stone. Emphasis on
This is
stone.
it's that stone, that you don't really want to step on because it's still
Yeah,
submerged.
maybe an unintentional example of a stone that the builder refused. So we've got other technologies that are being simulated from Star Trek. In fact, one of these Nokia releases back in the
This
'90s.
was This was actually from 2009.
Oh wow, okay,
Although the flip phone, I think, was essentially phased out in most markets by then.
okay,
This one was a prototype that was made specifically to be marketed alongside the first of the recent Star Trek movies made by J.J. Abrams.
right. Because this concept of the flip phone communicator, it's not anything new. Like this is something that's been around for quite some time.
Now, what we see on the screen here is a prototype. It's a prop replica essentially. But
Exactly what they used on the original series,
yes, you
basically.
see any of the crew of the Enterprise flip open this brass-coloured screen, which, from what I understand, serves as an antenna to the device, and the circular section is seems to be both a speaker and a rotational dial. But that Nokia phone was made to be like a modernised representation of that, and they did produce 14 of them as just to see like a market study,
Right,
essentially.
but the thing is like that flip
Well,
technology, and
the
there's a lot more to it.
although the original, the first cell phone that was ever developed was obviously not a flip phone. It looked more like a beige house brick with buttons on it.
Yeah, those were from the '90s and the '80s.
But the man that is credited with the invention of it was inspired by that same handheld communicator.
Hmm.
He has openly stated that. And I suppose that is part of how the device developed into the flip type design, which personally I'm still a fan of.
Yeah, I don't know why they phased that out.
There was one particular, I can't remember the model number, but there was a particular one that Nokia made. It had, on the side of where the hinge is, there was actually a button, and if you pressed the button, it flipped open on its own.
Did it make the cool Star Trek sound? Oh.
Unfortunately, not. Though that one does. The prototype that Nokia made to look like the to look like the Star Trek
How
communicator.
many did they make?
It, only 14, and they were a
Oh,
very faulty design. You had to use like a paper clip to hit the power button, and the charging port didn't work correctly, and you had to take off the battery cover to change the volume. And
it wouldn't be that hard for them to make something like that
I
nowadays.
would love to see it, honestly,
They could sell so many of
and
those.
incorporate the button to flip it open.
Yeah, and then like Trek, you could sell it at all the Trekkie conventions. They would
Oh,
sell out.
they would sell millions of them.
People would go to Trekkie conventions just to buy one.
I know one person in particular that I would move heaven and earth to get the money to buy one for.
Well, I was thinking about for me, but yeah, sorry, Lord, I forgot about you there. I was being selfish. Um,
That's and the cell phone isn't the only handheld. Well, of course, or the tricorder are not the only handheld devices to be inspired by Star Trek. There is another one that is almost as common as a cell phone these days.
tablet.
Tablet computer, first seen in. I'm not sure if they actually ever appeared in the original series, but
They showed them in. They didn't actually. They didn't show them in the Star Trek Next Generation until they showed them first in Deep Space Nine.
okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But
But with Star Trek Next Generation, they were showing things like the tricorder,
mm,
and the touch screen was something that they had on like on the consoles, the computer
yeah,
consoles, but the handheld version of it wasn't displayed until Deep Space Nine, which was still in the '90s,
yeah,
late '90s, and there wasn't anything like a tablet available on Earth today, but that, like you said, inspired this technology to be developed, and
yeah.
here we are. Now there's tablets that actually show just as detailed, if not more detailed, information than Star Trek ever could imagine, or Gene Roddenberry could have imagined.
Yeah, there was one, and I can't see the pictures, but there was another one that was seen as early as the original series, which was the Universal Translator. And in recent times, I've seen you can go on Amazon now and buy a device that looks almost like Apple's AirPods.
Okay.
But the only difference is the charging case opens sort of in the middle.
Uh-huh.
So the two halves of the case, and you've got one earbud thing in one side and one in the other. Put them in your ears, and I'm guessing it pairs with an app on your phone. You set the languages that you want. When someone, and if you're in a foreign country and someone speaks to you in the native language of that country, you will hear it played back in your ears in your own language.
Wow.
And then you can speak in reply to it, and the same device will play back in your ear the translation in the local language, which you can then recite. So although there'll be a little bit of a delay, you can have a conversation with anyone, anywhere in the world.
Or if they have the same device, then we could all just speak our own language and understand each other.
Speaking in tongues through technology.
Wow. That's so cool. Universal Translator.
One of the things I find interesting is, I think it's, as far as I know, it's exclusively for Apple devices. But whoever's got the power for the licensing over Star Trek intellectual property actually came up with an app that gives you an interface on an iPad or on an iPhone, which makes it look like it's going through the same operating system as the computer systems on the next generation. Star Trek.
Enterprise D.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is making me feel nostalgic. I think I might watch some Star Trek tonight.
I still haven't watched a lot of it.
Were you talking about the original series or any of them?
Any of them, really. I've seen some of the movies, but that's it. And a few episodes here and there.
The movies aren't that great compared to the show. The show is so much better.
The series, they obviously have the opportunity to go more in depth and show a range of different scenarios and things like that.
Yes. But there was a point in time when they shifted. I know this is way off topic here, but here we go. Star Trek, right? Original series, Next Gen, and I want to say those two. They followed the same plot lines or similar plot lines in that it was episodic. Every episode was its own story.
Yeah.
And then they started to shift it. I think starting with Deep Space Nine, then with Voyager, and so on and so forth. And it became an ever-increasing larger plot point they were trying to fulfill.
Okay.
And I think that's what started the change of Star Trek series.
Well, essentially wasn't... I have seen a fair bit of Voyager, to be honest. Not by choice, but I won't go into that. From what that was going back quite some time, but from what I remember of it, almost the entire series had one continuous plot point.
Yeah, it did. And, I mean, yeah, there were different things about it, but when you get into the newest Star Trek, it's just all... Like, they just keep you glued to it because you got to wait for the next episode to finish the story, and it just keeps on going and going and going until the end of the season.
You're talking about Discovery?
Discovery's one example.
Yeah, I did see a bit of that, but...
Yeah.
Although... I feel kind of... On one hand, I have wanted to watch Star Trek. I also feel more drawn to the more modern things, even though we know that they don't the more modern ones are less in keeping with the original vision of what Gene Roddenberry wanted.
I get why they do it though. They
need to come up with something fresh.
But not only that, they want to keep people glued to their screen.
Yeah.
They want it to be binge worthy. And that's really what gets the fan base going,
And
is being willing to sit down in front of it for hours and hours and hours.
and they have to compete with other similar things out there, and the direction Disney now that they gave George Lucas $9 billion for Lucasfilm.
I'm so sorry. I am so sorry that we are putting you people through this. I'm looking. My mind just went to another place. Like, from an audience perspective, like, I'm really not into Star Trek. Why are these guys talking about it? Do I really have to be here? No, you don't. And we're going to continue our Star Trek conversation off the air. If you'd like to join us, you know how to communicate with us. We've got our social medias in the description. We could talk about Star Trek. We could talk about the Shroud of Turin. We could talk about transphasic technologies. We could talk about a lot of things, including your very salvation. And we'd be happy to discuss these things with you. And again, we, the Ecumenical Order of Christ, stand in service to you, in service to God and to each other, through the commandments. Love God, love each other. In the name of the returned Christ, Lord Rael. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a blessed day. And thank you, brother.
Thank you for having me.